afternoon, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting, Monday, August 17th, 2026, and the time is 5 p.m. First of all, we'd like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the unceded ancestral territory of the Silt Okanagan peoples and the Splatsin of the Secwepemc Nation. First of all, we'll be looking for an adoption of the agenda, that the August 17th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as circulated. Councillor Valstar, second Councillor Todd. All those in favor? That will be carried. And next we'll be looking for an adoption of the minutes, that the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting May 4th, 2026 be adopted as circulated. Do we have any? Rapala, thank you. Second, Councillor Fowler, thank you so much. And all those in favor? And this too shall be carried. And moving right along, we'll be looking at our 15-year capital plan. I think many people are going to speak on this evening, but we'll start with Mr. Ackerman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight, staff is bringing forward a report to provide an overview of our 15-year capital plan. This project has been in the works here for the last, I would say, probably 16, 18 months, and we are coming forward with the draft right now. So I will provide a quick overview of the report. We do have Stacy Lick, who is the project lead on behalf of McElhaney, who will provide some commentary on the methodology in putting the report together, and then we will take a look at some of the 5-year and longer capital projects and what that is going to mean for council moving forward, and we'll be able to entertain some questions after that. So as mentioned, over the years, Armstrong has invested in a number of significant reports and studies into our municipal infrastructure assets and related infrastructure, ranging from condition assessments, modeling for current demand and future growth, and all of those reports lay together in somewhat of a silo with recommendations that sit within their respective services. So the intent of the 15-year capital plan is to pull all of those recommendations together into one document that helps lay out the priorities of those asset renewal and replacements, applying a methodology to it based upon risk, cost, and looking at some of those synergies that allow us to undertake a large function of infrastructure replacement in one go-round. So we engaged McElhaney to help us through this process and gathering all that information, going through pulling the recommendations, verifying the data, comparing that to some of our GIS data, and starting to go through and map out where those projects lie, the level of risk, and the level of risk associated to infrastructure in the vicinity of those areas. So they went through and put together all of that information and started peeling back the layers and looking for opportunities, and came up with a metrics to go through and evaluate that to help solidify the information and correlate it together to where we can make sure that decisions are made based upon the best available information. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Stacy with McElhaney just to provide a high overview of the methodology that was put together by McElhaney to evaluate all the information and help come up with some of the recommendations. Stacy, we will turn this over to you.
Can you hear us, Stacy? You're up.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I was having some issues hearing everyone else. So unfortunately, I missed the introduction. I think I heard just for a second that I was coming on. Apologies. I'm not sure who was just speaking. Maybe if I could get just a one sentence update on where we're at.
Yeah, sorry, Stacy, that was myself that was speaking just to provide the introduction. We're at the point if you can provide your overview of the methodology that you employed to put together the plan just at a high level to help council understand that process.
For sure. So what we did was we collected historical condition reports for for the water system, the sanitary system, the storm system, and roads as well. So using historical condition reports and as well as the city's GIS data, which included all of the relevant material, age, install years, and physical characteristics of these assets, we conducted a likelihood of failure, a consequence of failure, and risk analysis for all of these assets. And what that does is it helps the city to prioritize high risk assets to develop a 15-year capital plan. And what this does is it takes the subjectivity out of what should be upgraded first, and it moves it to an objective approach. So the likelihood of failure looked at things like the useful life and install years and material, as well as any capacity information. So capacity being for the water model and the sanitary sewer system, and as well as the storm system had capacity and future climate change capacity results. And then for condition, there was um, condition information for sanitary, and as well as for yeah, just for the sanitary. So as well as the road, sorry. And so using those criteria, uh, we apply weightings to the whether it's material based, capacity based, or condition based to come up with a likelihood of failure score of 1 to 5. So 1 being very low likelihood of failure, and a 5 being very high likelihood of failure. And we can dive into what these details are after. We'll give opportunity for questions. And then looking at the consequence of failure, we incorporated a multi-criteria analysis. So looking at the financial consequence, which is generally the asset replacement cost. We looked at service consequence. So the consequence of each asset, if it were to fail, what is the impact to the level of service being provided? We also looked at environmental consequence and economic, like business disruption. So if the assets were in any sort of major arterial road or under the railway. So for each of those asset classes, water, sanitary, storm, and road, the consequence score was averaged and also reported out on a score of 1 to 5, 1 being a very low consequence and 5 being a very high consequence. The two scores together, a likelihood of failure and a consequence of failure, when multiplied, gives you your overall risk score. And that risk score is on a scale of 1 to 25. So 1 being a very low risk and 25 being a critical risk. And so what we did was through consultation with the city, we understood that the road repaving prioritization was to come secondary to the underground infrastructure renewals. So the capital projects that were generated and prioritized were based around the risk profiles of the underground infrastructure. And then on top of that, looking at the overlying road condition to understand if the road on top was in a poor to very poor condition, then that road segment would be included as a full segment renewal, repaving. If the underground infrastructure was underneath a road in good condition, then the underground infrastructure, the pipe, would just be simply a trench and then resurface. in addition to each of the assessed pipes, the underground utilities, we also looked for opportunities to combine adjacent pipes that were with a likelihood of failure of 4 or 5, meaning that they were either in poor condition or they were under capacity. So within a road corridor, you would essentially could potentially see a number of adjacent different utility classes being renewed within the same corridor. And then on top of that, the road renewal based on its condition. So that's the overall approach that we took, the methodology for prioritizing the capital projects. And did we want to pull up that map, or was there any questions at this time?
At this time, I'll just dive into a little bit more of the 5-year capital plan and how that relates. We applied that same lens to the buildings and amenities and equipment as part of the infrastructure renewal. So you will see those numbers in there as well. And that's dealing with some of our infrastructure up at Thomas Hayes, the water treatment plant, Parks and Rec, the fairgrounds. So that is built into that as well with input from the various services. So as you can see, the process that was put together to bring forward the priorities for the 15-year capital plan, that's that starting point for staff and council of the day to distill through the number of projects and have a magnitude of cost that comes with it. We basically distill this down to our 5-year capital plan, which forms part of our provincial requirements for finance reporting, and that's kind of what you see in our 5-year operating and capital budget. So figure 13 in the document outlines our prioritized capital projects for the next 5 years. And this document is a live document revisited each year through the budget process. Once we achieve goals, we get new information. This is adapted as we complete the current fiscal year. Year 6 then rolls into the 5-year capital plan, and it continues to roll through like that. As you can see, the map above outlines the projects that rank the highest in regards to consequence of failure and risk, and put together forms $43,567,151 anticipated costs to undertake those projects. I will note that that does include the water filtration plant, which would be subject to funding opportunities via grants and or borrowing if a drinking water order was issued. But that is built into the 5-year capital plan. And an overview of kind of the projects, as you can see on the map, the highlights of them, and I can just do kind of a quick overview of those. Project number 1, Rosedale Avenue, and that is upgrading 500 mil drinking water main line coming through right from the highway into to Catherine. So that is kind of the next phase of the twinning works that we currently have underway, and that takes care of that aged infrastructure. Through that works, we'll also deal with a section of sanitary, approximately 122 meters, storm line in there, and repaving of the road through there. Anticipated cost of $902,000 currently projected. Second project, Pleasant Valley Boulevard. And this works is currently underway. This is the PV North project. So this report identified the failing infrastructure that was currently in place. As we're moving forward with the PV Boulevard, we are looking at some additional enhancements to that corridor as part of the upgrade works. Shepherd's Lane is project number 3, and these projects are subject to some manipulation just in regards to pairing the projects and timing overall, but this kind of lays out those top priorities for us based on risk. That deals with some sanitary work, storm work, as well as rejuvenation of Shepherd's Lane, forecast to be just $360,000, just shy. The other one, this is a larger scale, Project 4, which is Wood Avenue, Otter Lake Road, in resurfacing that section, in addition to water main replacement, stormwater replacement up to a 600 mil, and then resurfacing the road. A good portion of the road was categorized as fair, and the majority of Otter Lake Road, just shy of 2 kilometers, as poor, as we've all experienced. Other projects in there, Patterson Avenue and Mill Street, dealing with some of the sanitary underground risk, 200 mil AC main, the 200 mil storm, and dealing with the road infrastructure. That project there is just $1.150 million, $1,150,928. Pleasant Valley, another section. This one is Project 6, and this deals with the section that is just along the Fall Fairground frontage, up to Park Street, and dealing with some of the aged infrastructure there, mainly the sanitary. We have that 375 main, which feeds underneath the railroad tracks and into the Fall Fairground, so this is one of our trunk mains. Storm system there as well, gathers that information there, and dealing with the road condition there as one lumped project. That's forecast at $484,878. Project number 7, Smith Drive, now fits into some of the future carry planning works. The report has identified those sections of Smith Drive with infrastructure underneath that is subject to failure and carries that risk. Of course, with the carry revitalization, we would be looking at additional works for surface treatments to move along with the revitalization works. Main sections in there, storm and sanitary, both requiring updates and upgrades, and road repaving and surfacing. Pleasant Valley Road, another section, project number 8, and this one is a little further along up towards Sugden, up towards the Red Brick School, and dealing with some of the aging infrastructure under there. Forecast to come in at $466,000 and change, and dealing with the storm line and roads updates through there. Project number 9 falls back into Smith, and again will be captured as part of that carry project, but it's dealing with those upgrades as required. End of Curtin, we have a force main there that's unknown age and material, and this one will be addressed as we deal with that. We do have some other infrastructure there that was subject to a water break earlier this year that will be updated to this project as well. Park Drive and Adair Street, project number 11, coming in at $193,000 change, dealing with sanitary and storm works there. And we get into Okanagan Street, project 12. This is Okanagan Street North. You'll see it on the map, which basically goes from Wood up to Highland Park, and that is dealing with the infrastructure that we have underneath there with the aged out 100 mil water line, in another section of the PVC main, storm, and then Okanagan Street in very poor condition. There will be an addition to this one as we look to a solution with the bridge crossing. So that is still under review and will be incorporated once we have a clear path forward on that project. Becker Street is project number 13, dealing with the aged out water main and the poor condition of the street. Patterson Avenue follows in along with that one, and in Patterson Street, all dealing with the aged out infrastructure and poor road conditions in that section. And this would be a larger bundled project put together to deal with those in a manner that can meet our financial capabilities. So that kind of forms the first high-level priority that we'll be looking at incorporating into a 5-year capital plan to come to council for future budget consideration. With that, Terry, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the financial opportunities to support that.
Can I interrupt for a second? They're really having trouble hearing online, so if everyone can lean into your microphones when you're talking, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Just the current situation with funding of reserves, what we're looking at right now currently is approximately an annual contribution total of about 2.1 million into reserves for capital. That is water, sewer combined, roads and drainage, fire department, recreation, fleet replacements, and equipment. So altogether, we're looking at around currently 2.1 million in funding that's already in place that is funded, subject to council approval every year, obviously, but it's funding that does not have to be searched for. It is already built into the financial plan.
So we do have a couple considerations for council. We have the recommendation being put forward through staff that the Committee of the Whole recommends that council endorse the 15-year capital plan. Alternatively, there is an alternative recommendation that the 15-year capital plan document is an accumulation of data collected and assessments examining the city's infrastructure. The recommendations contained within are based on the information collected. Endorsing the plan does not unilaterally commit council to action in the recommendations. The only other option available is to not endorse the plan and seek changes. Although staff do not recommend this approach, the following resolution would be required should council choose to follow this path. And that would be that council, the whole does not recommend council endorse the 15-year capital plan, and that the plan be brought back to future meetings with the following changes at council's desire. So with that, I will turn it over to your worship for any questions of council.
Thank you. I'm not sure if council wants to proceed with the first recommendation regarding that the Committee of the Whole recommends and the council endorses the capital plan as presented, or if you want to look at the section off and then looking for some input. Councilor Feller?
Well, it's a lot, and I'd kind of like to hear the rest. I'm kind of really
If I may, Your Worship, certainly at the Committee of the Whole level, there's a little bit more flexibility with proceeds, so I think it would be completely appropriate for those questions to be answered before proceeding.
Good, thank you. Then, next for questions to either Mr. Ackerman or Slick. Any questions? Councilor Bowser.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a really big report, and I know that a lot of people, when they see our roads, they only see the asphalt on top, and they judge the road specifically on that without knowing the extensive research that we've put in over the past couple of years into seeing all the pipes under the ground and everything. So having that information and then coming up with a plan to actually action it, this is excellent. This is good governance. My question, I've got a list of questions, but I know when we got that report in 2023 that gave the road conditions for the different roads and saying that there was a few that needed help right away. I noticed that Hayden, Highland Park to Keevil, and Schubert to the city limits weren't on the 15-year plan, and like Schubert sucks. Like that's a terrible. And like, is that something that can be done on top of this plan, or how does that work?
Yeah, through your worship, we do have that ability to go through and add additional to that. In the initial look, we just looked at the underground utilities as priority and replacing that before road and trying to pair those together. I think we've all experienced where nobody likes to see a brand new stretch of road dug up to repair something and replace something underneath. But with this information that we've gathered from the report now, we have that ability to go back in and take a look that because we do have such a backlog of infrastructure needs, that there are some opportunities that we can look at going through and resurfacing roads, recognizing that they will be towards the end of their life cycle before we're actually able to action some of the infrastructure underneath due to funding. So we can look at doing some treatments to those sections.
Councilor Todd.
Sorry, I've got two more quick ones here. So we'll see quick. I noticed that CO2 Pleasant Boulevard North was slated for 2028. Is that on top of like the project that we have currently going on, or am I not understanding the scope? So I saw that it's slated in the report for 2028. So I'm just wondering if we're doing it now. How, like, I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah, so that one has been bumped up, and we just have not adjusted that anticipated date.
Okay, so that's perfect. And then my last question for this slate of questions is when we do Otter Lake, are the trees going to come down when we do that road?
Through your worship, there is a risk in doing that upgrade work. The trees along Otter Lake Road are getting toward the end of their lifespan. They aren't growing in the best conditions. We've seen failure in those trees. We have it on the radar to look at doing tree assessments on those, but the nature of the works will impact their root structure significantly, and we will likely lose a good portion of the trees along there. But we would have to look at some interplanting that goes with that to recreate that kind of iconic look for Otter Lake. But we will end up in a period where we are without some of those trees, undoubtedly.
That's everything. Thank you so much.
So Todd. Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering where and how the rest of the Revite fits into this. I don't see south side of Pleasant Valley or the bike path along anywhere, or, yeah, well, at least those two.
Yeah, so they will be incorporated into the plan. Right now we have them on the list at a high level, but we haven't taken it down to the point of costing that comes with that. So they will be involved in an update that comes forward once we have time and budget for those to fit them in.
Perfect. So it won't be 15 years down the road. It'll be sometime within that time frame, one would hope.
That is correct, yeah. It'll be a revised version.
Thank you, Worship. So the plan reflects what we currently have and how we replace it. When we start talking about new infrastructure in addition to, that will get factored into the timing of the existing infrastructure that's going to be added to. So just for example, as we're working through the process of the connection down Pleasant Valley from Smith up this way, you can see it's not on the 15-year horizon, but if that project comes to fruition sooner than later, we would have to look at that to see if there was a way to either keep it separate or engage the project to be larger to deal with it at that time. So any new infrastructure would have a slightly different lens as they come forward in the context of the historical stuff that we're looking at. Yep.
Just one more quick one about rent vanished.
Thank you, Worship. I really appreciate this report and just giving council the data that we need to help make these decisions. And I think there's always different priorities that come up, right? And whether that's some resident concerns or projects that we want to get done, it all comes from the taxpayer dollars. And so now at least we have the information in front of us where we can say, okay, if we choose to spend money here, where else is it going to come from? And I think just from my time on council, seeing these projects kind of evolve and decisions shift as we need to make adjustments for the money that we have along the way. And I think we have to be, as council, okay with that, right? Like sometimes we're pushing things further down the road and kind of knowing what the report's risk score says, but then having to make that decision in real time. But at least this is a good base for pulling all these reports together that we've had for a while. I guess my question for that, to help council make those decisions when inevitably they come up, do we have the flexibility within the scoring that exists? Like we can see it in the report on the PDF, but I think of something like the environmental risk score, right? And like that can be really specific. If we're just assigning the risk score based on like industrial zone, not every industrial zone carries the same risk. And same thing with roadways, right? If we're looking at a roadway degradation in proximity to a water course, that risk score doesn't really equate to the same risk. Like a risk score of 5 on a road degrading near a water course doesn't equate to me to a risk of 5 for a sanitary sewer line going by like failing near a water course. So like, will we have the ability to adjust some of those numbers with the report as like decision times come? Like 3 years from now, we need to make a tough decision. Are we able to go back and actually manipulate those scores a little bit? Not to change the report, but just to help us make those decisions.
Yes, Your Worship. We will have access to that background information as part of the report, and council at the time can go back and look at that a little further to understand the scores at the time and see if they're still applicable. And maybe I'll defer to Stacy just to provide some commentary. We are looking at a GIS layer that we will have for our system that has all of this information that staff will use on an ongoing basis, but that background documentation does form part of that review.
Sorry, can I have a quick follow-up just before Stacy might want to speak to that? Is I appreciate that we can't get that granular in a report like this, right? Like there, at a certain point, there isn't the benefit to actually getting down to a property by property granular type thing. It would take forever. And so like, I'm super happy with the report. I just want to know if there's that flexibility moving forward with I guess the calculations. And like, again, just because it was so much, I've read through it a couple times now, and I keep picking up more stuff as I look at it. And so like, even if the math or the equations are there, that we can go in and kind of get at that later on would be super helpful for the city.
Yeah, Your Worship, we will have that opportunity to undertake that at the time.
Stacy, did you want to make any comment to that?
Sure. So I appreciate that, yeah, this is something that you've considered, and this is as Armstrong goes through this process in future years, with every type of doctor report like this and planning exercise, it's important to keep in mind that risk tolerances may change over time or may be viewed in a different way. So the framework is laid out, and as Brad mentioned, we will be providing all of this data updated for each asset with its likelihood of failure, consequence of failure, and risk scores. And you have a framework here that can be reapplied in the future, and the data will be populated. But it's really those thresholds for the scales of 1 to 5 for your consequences, where you may need to revisit or feel the need to revisit it to change some of those thresholds. And that's something that the risk appetite may change over time. And so a municipality always has the option of changing those values that match its needs and its wants, and to make it realistic for the community.
Councillor Fowler.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the comments that we made, and I'm glad to hear that there's other people on the same line. I think a 15-year plan, this was a great read, by the way. I really appreciated the work that went into it. I'm not sure we've had something quite this detailed for a 15-year plan in the past, so I like that. I just wanted to hear if everybody else realizes that as detailed as a plan is, there has to be flexibility involved, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why I wanted to hear other comments, and one was look at the dollars just flabbergasting. I probably will never get over how prices have changed over my tenure here. Sorry. But I think that so much is dependent, there's so many things dependent on a 15-year plan. Who knows what's going to happen? For example, there might be grants come up that let us get something done ahead of time. There might be no grants when we're wanting to do the $5 million one. So these things we have to realize that we'll move this forward. It's still with the flexibility of change. And one other change that's coming up is an election. We may not be the people sitting here next year making the decisions about how to move forward with this. So as of today, as of this vote, it'll be our decision, and then that's also flexible. I really wanted to hear what everybody else had to say, and I hate to say that this is like the guideline with all the work that went into it, but I also remember it was about 2012 or 13 when we first were going to do the downtown revitalization on Pleasant Valley. We're finally getting it done now. We were prepared to do it then. We just couldn't come to the conclusion, everybody agreeing what we wanted to see there, including the community, of course. So that's kind of my main point. I'm happy to pass this motion today, knowing that nothing is set in stone, moving forward with all the options of who's making the decisions, the money, and failure that we don't anticipate happening in some of these places. Of course, we've done a lot of studies in the last few years that help us do this plan and make this plan look like it's top-notch, but there's always things that happen. So thanks for listening, and thanks for your questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just first of all wanted to say thank you for all the years of work that went into just getting the good data, like going and scoping out the lines and all that innovative thinking to even just relining the pipes to get some extra years. And yeah, there was a lot of background work that went into this over the last several years that just, in my opinion, got us quality data. So thank you for that. Just thinking in terms of what we were talking about earlier about resurfacing and budgets and how we're looking at costs here. What are our expectations as far as our resurfacing plan? Will there be some adjustments or some more funding needed, or what are the thoughts there?
Through Your Worship, now that we've got all this information compiled and we're looking at the underground infrastructure and what paving needs will be addressed via that avenue, we will go back and take a look at the lens of an asphaltic overlay project and what would it take to fund that in order to renew some of the lifespan of the infrastructure that will take some time to deal with the underground infrastructure and come back with more information at budget to help support that to address that deficit at a bit of an accelerated rate until we can catch up on the underground infrastructure.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of now that we know where the assets underneath are at, that we can focus our priorities on those better, and I appreciate the answer. A little bit more time. My other, I guess, comment more than anything, several years ago, I think it was Councillor Nietzsche that brought forward the idea of a tree replacement program, especially along Otter Lake there. So I would like to see something proactive happen. If there's an opportunity to start trees growing now, then we should be doing that now, is my last thought. Yeah,
through Your Worship, it's a a recommended practice and a fantastic idea. As improvements are made to Otter Lake, we would also go to the extent of creating a more conducive environment to support healthy street trees. That we can look at getting some larger caliper trees come in that are already established and not your 5-gallon nursery special, just to kind of help fast track that process and given the right growing conditions and engineering infrastructure to support it, we can return that to a healthy corridor and create that iconic look again quite easily, versus just doing it on a shortcut.
So getting to the trees that stretch of trees along there actually was the beginning of a replacement tree there. We had adopted trees went down for a while, but there wasn't the water to support the growth of a new tree, and the roots were all tangled. So it's almost like you have to take out every second tree to start a replacement going, but the water as well. And there's quite a story to these trees as well. I don't know if you know, this one's called Fool's Folly. And I'll come back with the report if you like, but it was looked at as a folly, but that folly has lasted for what, close to 100 years. So if we can put another folly in there, it's much better.
I wanted just to echo essentially what everybody said here. We spent lots of money during our term getting reports and updates and road conditions assessments done, and we've scoped all our water lines and our treatment sanitary lines and our storm lines. And at some point in time, we all thought, well, we're doing all these things, but we're not seeing any action on it. And now you've brought this together in a file that makes sense, and it makes sense on the path that we look at taking forward and prioritizing the projects that we have. And I think that's really important. I think what Councillor Drapla brought up also, that they can change, that we can change the project or the priority of the project based on new things that come up, such as environmental factors and stuff like that. And we can also move projects that we have scaled back to the forefront if we need to, and having that ability to do that is great. That's a lot of hard work that's gone into this, and it's only taken almost 4 years, but I can see the future and the future of the projects in our community, and the majority of them, including building updates and everything. So I'm really happy with that board and happy to vote on something tonight. Councilor Duncan.
Thank you. And I think just to piggyback on that, I know probably before my time on council, but when I got on council 12 years ago, it was really finding this data so that we could make the decisions, but then also to position us well for any grants that come along, because having all of this data together really enables us to leverage that money that is out there with the province. And so it's seeing the reports come out slowly and helping kind of approve those reports as we go. It's really nice to see it come together, like, yeah, a decade later, right?
Is there any more comments or questions? Not seeing. Oh, Councilor Feller.
I'm just texting Councillor Nietzsche to see if he had any questions. He couldn't hear anything, so he's bowed out. But do you have some questions already?
Your Worship, he didn't have any questions on this. He has some questions.
Fair enough then. Since there are no comments or questions, we will require a motion. Was there one that was provided to us that the group was interested in moving forward? Councilor Drapla.
I'll make the recommendation that Committee of the Whole recommends that Council endorse the 15-year capital plan as presented.
Thank you, Councilor Drapla. It was seconded by Councilor Todd. He beat you to it. I'll ask one more time. Is there any other further questions? Not seeing any, then I will call the vote. All those in favor? That will be carried unanimously. Next, we'll be going to item 4.2, the Subdivision and Development Services Bylaw Update by Ms. Cordell, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just let me get organized here.
As you're aware, we've been working through an update to the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. This is a bylaw that I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with lately, which has been really interesting. And since we've had our new engineer on staff, we've spent a lot of time kind of digging into it and working through some of the requirements to see how they work and how they fit. So it's a good time for us to be doing this review. This bylaw is from 2007, so it's pretty old. Surprisingly, though, a lot of things are still pretty relevant within it. The funding that we used for this update came from the Local Government Housing Initiatives Capacity Fund that we got when we had to do the zoning bylaw updates. We've identified some main challenges with the bylaw. Some of the language is really out of date. There have been some new zoning rules. And then with those zoning rules, there's some key points that we wanted to do. We're also looking at this as an opportunity to introduce the master municipal construction drawings. I had it in my head, which are more of a standardized approach to how municipalities address servicing. And it's a document that's a living document, so we reference that document, and if it gets updated, then that's great. We don't have to redo our bylaw. Those kind of things that make me happy, because changing the bylaw is, as you can see, a bit of a process. We've also integrated some changes related to the new density provisions, because with every parcel allowing 4 units on site, we've had to figure out how we service those units and what the kind of technicalities of working through that looks like. We've also integrated not active transportation standards really, but an opportunity for the city engineer to integrate active transportation where it makes sense and aligns with the plans that we have of council. The other thing that we've done is we've clarified what the right-of-way road widths are. So as we go through subdivision applications, we look at whether we need road dedication or not. And we've noticed that as we look at the historical record, sometimes people took more, sometimes they took less. Sometimes they took some on one side but not the other. So this gives us some standardization so that when we're doing a subdivision, it's clear how much road right-of-way we're supposed to take for at least the main roads in town. So I'm just going to go through this at a really high level. We have basically at the front of it, we have what we call the bylaw. It's got the definitions. It kind of is the high-level approach to servicing within the community. And then attached to that, we have all the schedules that provide the details of how we implement that. And we have schedules A to Z. So it makes the bylaw lengthy. And I'm sure as some of you noticed, it's 225 pages. It includes drawings. It includes forms and templates. So it's quite thorough, and it's something we use regularly in the work that we're doing. So overall, we're looking to modernize some of the language and templates. We've updated some of those definitions, and we found definitions that were in there but not referenced anywhere in the document, so we've taken those out. We've added servicing officer, which isn't what it says on the slide. A servicing officer is a new power that was provided to local governments when the province made all those changes. And a servicing officer allows local governments to take road dedication at building permit, because with the new allocation of 4 units per lot, there'll probably be fewer subdivisions because people can just build more without subdividing. So they've provided us the ability to take road dedication at building permit. Now, including servicing officer in our bylaw won't allow us to do that. We have to go through a delegation process in the delegation bylaw, but it just sets the stage for if council wants to adopt that as we move forward. We have updated where we take security. Just to be clear around deficiencies, it was listed in some parts of the bylaw, but not in others. The submission requirements were really old. They talked about CD-ROMs and needing 4 paper copies. And so we've just reduced that to 1 paper copy and a digital file as needed. So then if it changes, it doesn't matter. We've actually removed the preliminary layout review form, which is the subdivision application form. And that's because when you have an application form in a bylaw, if you want to make a change to the application form, you have to amend the bylaw. So instead, we've just referenced on a form acceptable to the city, and then we can amend that form as we need. The subdivision servicing officer guide actually has really strong examples of what those should look like anyways, and that's what most people base them off of. And then we took out places where there were actual fees described in the bylaw and just referenced the rate, fees, and charges, because that's a change we've made since that time, and we're doing that with all our bylaws. Schedule A is the one, I think, where we see the most changes. We've simplified the tables prescribing levels of service. So previously, there were these complex tables that had every single zone we had in the city listed and what the level of service was for each of those. Well, we've changed the zoning significantly since 2007. And so I tried to generalize it. So now we've got residential, kind of high-density residential, commercial, institutional. And that way, it just, if we change our zoning actual titles, we don't have to change the table all the time. This is, again, we've added that active transportation level of service, the statutory right-of-way widths, and the roads that we specified the right-of-way widths on were Okanagan, Pleasant Valley Road, Rosedale, Smith, and Wood. So those are kind of our main roads. So we wanted to just be really clear and make sure that we get the future outcomes that we need. So I've put a bunch of schedules on this slide because a lot of these schedules had very few changes. So Schedule B, which is the road right-of-ways, we've updated our submission requirements. Sorry, I'm getting cracky. Schedule C and D, which is our water and sanitary levels of service. We included the requirements for when you have more than one unit, and clarity on that a duplex requires 2 meters and 2 services, and a townhouse requires a service for each unit, just because we've had some challenges having that not totally clear in the bylaw, so that just clears that up. Schedule E, we've just added the new density requirements for storm because there might be an additional need for a bigger storm. Schedule F and G, there were no real changes. So F is the curb, gutter, sidewalk. G is the street lights. Schedule H, which is our utility schedule, we've just made it more generic. So before we listed BC Tel, Terracin, somebody else, and those names change over time. So we've just called it now third-party utilities. And we've also taken reference out, we had reference to their specific drawing standards. Instead, we've just said the standards of the third-party utilities. Those utilities review and approve those drawings anyways, and the applicants are required to submit proof of that approval to us. So there was no need to specifically list what those standards are. Schedule I is the landscaping. We made no changes to that. Schedule J are the specification drawings. So the changes that we made here was to change some of them to the MMCD drawings, but only in places where we weren't doing something specific for Armstrong. So for example, we didn't take out the curb and gutter because we have a slightly different curb profile. And in a neighborhood that's under development, you might see that shift where the curb looks like slanty in one direction, and then all of a sudden it has to be taller on the next block. So this just allows us to be consistent throughout the community. Schedule K is, no, where am I? Schedule I, yeah, so Schedule K and L. So Schedule K is survey, design, and drawings. We've just updated the wording. Schedule L is materials, construction, and testing. Again, minor updates to the wording. Schedule M is where we remove that application form. We moved the Schedule M1, which is our development servicing agreement that we do with developers, just calling that Schedule M now. Removed our references to the rates, fees, and charges. Schedule N, which is a template for statutory right-of-way. We didn't change that, other than we have added, of course, the we've added, not in the template, but elsewhere in the document, that we have minimum widths for statutory right-of-ways. So what we added was, as the statutory right-of-way gets deeper, it has to get wider so that we have room to be able to excavate. Schedule O is the commitment, the construction commitment. Schedule P is the certificate of inspection. We just added a 60-day submission timeline for the record drawings, just to provide clarity on that. Schedules P, which is certificate of inspection. Schedule Q is just subdivision completion. Schedule R, which is our certificate of completion. Schedule S, which is final acceptance. Schedule T, which is acceptance of the non-refundable deposit. And Schedule U, which is the cost sharing agreement. We didn't make any significant changes, some minor wording. Schedule V, which is the insurance certificate, we've changed it from 2 million to 3 million liability, just in recognition of the kind of escalating risks that we have. A lot of places have gone to 5 million, but we weren't sure with the smaller community and smaller development groups that 5 million might be a stretch. Schedules W, which is the letter of credit. X, which is our testing, our flushing testing disinfectant, our hydrant testing, and our signed releases. We didn't make any significant changes to them. I think there was a typo in one and a couple of wording changes. So that is a very, very quick kind of go through of it. I can have the document open, so if there's any details that we want to get into as we go through the document, I can do that. The recommendation we have in front of you today is just that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council give first, second, and third readings to Subdivision Development Servicing Bylaw 1950-2026. And just for clarity as well, we are expecting to reformat the bylaw part of the document. We are working through it, but it's so large that when you see it formally in front of you at Council, it'll be slightly formatted different. Not the wording change, but the formatting. I have the bylaw up now. Want me to look at anything?
See, Councillor Nietzsche has a couple questions posted there somewhere, so why don't we start with that?
Sure, I can bring his questions up, actually. They're in the chat. And so the other thing that I didn't say is Jeff Brackett, the city engineer from McElhaney, is on the call today to help with technical questions. Because while I've been in the weeds, I still don't understand the calculations or some of the more engineering aspects. So let me see if I can find the chat box again. Okay, so this question is, from personal experience, most of the MMCD standards are likely fine, but some have been designed primarily for Lower Mainland, specifically regarding stormwater retention and discharge. Some requirements that commercial development store 90% of storm on site, then slowly discharge to municipal storm. This can be costly. You want to make sure that we're not rigid with those standards and practical with developers when required, and bring issues back to Council to relax or waive the standards as necessary. So what I can say is anytime an applicant wants to vary the standards, of course, they have the opportunity to come before Council through a variance permit application. We just had one at the last Council meeting. So of course, if an applicant chooses to proceed with varying the standards, we would bring it before Council. That's a kind of standard procedure. Jeff, maybe you can speak to the differences in the standards from what we do and what there might be in more down on the coast.
Yeah, for sure. How's my volume with the first time I'm speaking here?
Good.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so a big thing about how we're trying to incorporate MMCD into this current document is that we're trying to give ourselves a way to incorporate those standards in the future as we go. So it's not to say that we've adopted MMCD as a whole, particularly the text components of that. What we've tried to focus on right now is primarily Schedule J. Schedule J contains a number of detailed drawings. So how might you put together a manhole? How might you um, make certain types of pipe connections? So certainly not something as broad or as wide ranging as how we manage stormwater in the community or by development, but really a lot of those details where it doesn't make sense for each individual city to have a drawing of how they want manholes to be assembled or catch basins to be assembled. So some of those details, it's really just a problem to kind of track those, update those, and keep those modern. Whereas if we can just kind of use the MMCD as a reference point for some of those recurring specs, you get a lot of them on projects. The fellows out at LECO Precast, they're familiar with those standards. They can produce to them off the MMCD. That's really where we're at right now is sort of the details. We're not looking to adopt something like a different method of calculating stormwater, infiltration systems, and those kinds of systems. Those are outside of the scope of the amendments we've proposed now. And from that list that Lori was working through, I believe those are in some of the sections which had limited amendments, which are largely the way that we do this work, whereas this is more sort of as it'll get built by the contractors.
And if I can add to that, like I have the list in front of me here, and it's like a typical 150 mil sanitary manhole, typical drop manhole, typical storm manhole, curb and gutter detail for the specific situation, standard sidewalk crossing at a driveway entrance, standard walkway. So they're very specific pieces. They're not kind of more principles. They're more like how is the engineer going to build that tiny little piece or that manhole or that crossing?
Councilor Dropper.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to pretend to know how these changes impact builders in the community. Like I don't, that's not my world. But I guess what that makes me think of is, do we have an opportunity to engage people in our community that this does impact? So like when we're putting out a new bylaw, is there a way that we could put out, like give a couple readings, put out something to the community that says, here's our rationale, here's some of the changes, and what's your potential, like what's your feedback? And it's not that we're bound by it, but at least then we can consider some of the changes before we give final reading or adoption. Is there an opportunity for something like that, even just as practice for lots of these bylaw changes that we do in the city? I know it slows everything down, but I think we need to find ways to engage a little bit more.
Thank you, Worship. So this is a bit of a different type of bylaw in that it's mapping out the standards for development. The challenge becomes if you want to try and open that up to public input is with respect, the majority of people won't actually even understand what the impacts are. And changing the standards from this is predominantly an engineering-based document, descriptive how you're tying in services for driveways and storm and sanitary and so on. Is it possible? Yes. Is it valuable? I'm not sure it is, especially in the context of how little change has been made overall to the bylaw from what exists now, other than the movement towards the MMCD standard, which is a universal standard of province for water service. And we kept what I call the Armstrong specific ones where they made sense for the community, they worked here. The other ones were moved to MMCD because it makes it easier from an applicability perspective because the contractors are familiarized with those MMCD standards for the various components, sanitary, sewer. So, the short answer is yes, we could. I just don't know what the benefit of doing it.
Could I just add one more thing too? Is that the updates are more for clarification of our current practices. So this isn't a bylaw that we're making dramatic changes and adding on to the requirements for developers. I think if we were doing that, we would want to maybe not have public engagement, but bring the developers together to have a roundtable or something and walk through it. But this is mostly just making the wording reflect what we're doing already in a clearer way so that when we're applying it, they understand it better and we understand it better.
Just to follow up then, so for the new drawing standards, does that bring us into alignment with neighboring municipalities then as well? And so like, are we, I guess, as someone that does work in, not me, but for contractors that do work in all the municipalities surrounding us, I think the more alignment we can have, the better.
Through your worship to Councillor Drapala. Yes, it does. That's one of the main benefits of using those standards. And it's something that we hear from developers, especially ones that come from out of town, not the ones that mostly develop in Armstrong, is that our standards are different and they didn't realize, or they're just not used to it. And that won't completely go away, you know, because sometimes it's our zoning bylaw and sometimes it's other things, but this is moving us generally in that direction.
Councillor Todd. Thank you, Your Worship. I know we had a couple of roundtables with developers in the community in the last couple of years, and I think they really facilitated to get our point of view across and allow them to get their point of view across. And I think it was very helpful. I think we really we cleared the air in a bunch of ways. But I think this would be something if we do have another one, and we should have another one of those meetings. This is the kind of conversations we could have at that time. And any kind of input they had would be really, really helpful for everybody. And I think we're probably due again, perhaps if we're on council or the next council, whatever. I think it's been 6 or 8 months since the last one, I think, probably.
I want to just say that I think those meetings that we did have made great strides between the development community and our local government here to fix some of those problems. And I haven't heard too many issues rise up since we managed to do that. So I think that was beneficial. And I don't think they hurt to continue scheduling as we move along, just to hear what's going on in the air.
Yeah, I really appreciate that as well. I think the more stakeholder engagements we can have, even just the communication piece, to make sure that what we're saying, we're trying to clarify language that can be understood better, but unless it's echoed back, we don't necessarily know if it's actually been clarified or it's more confusing to them. So I think that's absolutely key. One of my questions is like, as we're doing these connections, we have, I think the next step in the PC's energy step code is in 2027. And then if we're looking at, you know, the long-term future of passive houses, those aren't necessarily perfectly aligned on a lot, right? Because you're trying to maximize the energy efficiency. And questions like that of trying to work that in with these details, I'm going to guess can be challenging.
Through your worship. Actually, I think the subdivision servicing bylaw maybe won't pose so many challenges to that kind of development. The biggest change I think that we've done lately that really supports that is the changes we made to the zoning bylaw, where we said you can build whatever kind of house you want, whatever kind of dwelling unit you want. You can have 4 of them and they can be mostly wherever except for the setbacks, instead of being really prescriptive on the form and character within the zoning bylaw. The subdivision servicing bylaw will say, like, if you're going to strata those and each one needs a connection. But I don't think that it would restrict kind of anything else in that line. The one thing that we might see in the future is maybe less water consumption if we went, say, way down the road of having a house that reused its water or something. But I think we're a ways out from that.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of the connection itself and how the details might align or not align with a house that's not necessarily aligned to the street. So.
And just to follow up on that too, I mean, they'll connect right at the street, but once they're in their property, they move wherever they want. Yeah.
Other comments or questions? Did Councilor Nietzsche chime in with anything else? I didn't see anything. Just double checking.
Just, Your Worship, just the question that the Squirrel read over.
Right, and on that note, recording if somebody's interested in advancing that. Councillor Valistar, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Todd, would you like me to read it for you, Councillor Todd? The Committee of the Whole recommends Council give first, second, and third readings to the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw number 1950-2026. Was there any further? Not seeing any, then I will call the vote. All those in favor? And this will be carried. And that is our Committee of the Whole meeting for tonight. Next, I'll be looking for a motion for adjournment that the August 17th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting be adjourned at 6:11 p.m. Councillor Dravel, Councillor Wayner, and all those in favor. This meeting stands adjourned.